All right. Okay. And we're live. Excellent. Well, hey, good afternoon or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. My name is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And it's always a treat and an honor to welcome our good friend Brad Meltzer back with us. We're going to be discussing his brand new book, The Lightning Rod. And Brad, do you have the thing, or would you like me to put up a shot of the cover?
No, I brought a very high-tech cover for you.
That looks great. And our signed copies of The Lightning Rod should be arriving momentarily to the bookstore. And I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field on YouTube and Facebook, should you like to order a copy. And I'm sure Brad would be happy to sign some more if we happen to sell out, which I think we're getting close. And Barbara's tuning in from home. I'm tuning in from my home office. It's a very modern program we're doing today. But if you have questions for Brad at any time during the hour, just go ahead and put them in the comments field, and I'll be happy to ask them when Barbara summons me back on screen. Barbara, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Well, Brad, a toast to you, because this is actually not quite publication day, but I think this is your first formal event, is it not?
This is the first event we're doing for the Lightning Rod. This is the first one, so thank you for hosting me from the start. I believe my first book to now, 25 years, I have been at the Poison Pen.
Well, you have, and I was thinking back to it, 1997, when the 10th Justice published, and I remember we weren't in the bigger bookstore, so we must have been gypsying up and down somewhere in Scottsdale to find a big venue. And I remember all the buzz, which is, book selling world for, wow, this might be a bestseller or something, buzz going on about the 10th Justice. And I remember sitting there and looking at you. I have children who are 5 years older than you. And I thought to myself, he looks impossibly young for all this to be happening. Wow. And today, 25 years later, you're still impossibly young.
When I look back, I now have a 20-year-old son, and I sold the 10th Justice when I was 24. It came out when I was 27. And I look back and I'm like, why did anyone trust a 27-year-old to go on book tour, much less to write a book? But I'm thankful for those people who, especially in Arizona, who came to that first event. Because when you go to your very, very first event, on your first book, nobody's there. I mean, my event in Houston for the 10th Justice had 2 people there. It had 0 people there for the first hour. At the end of the first hour, my friend from law school came with her mother. So we had 2. So anyone who came, if you were there, 2 things. 1, thank you. And 2, you are old.
Well, I looked it up, and we actually sold 100 copies of the 10th Justice, so I don't recall how many people showed. But anyway, it's really wonderful to be able to share your 25th anniversary with you. And it's been 4 years since The Escape Artist published. And I remember sitting in our green room talking to Brad as he was signing zillions of copies about the concept for this. And for those who haven't read The Escape Artist, and you don't have to have read it to actually, it would help, but you don't have to have read it to read The Lightning Rod. And by the way, this is my advanced reading copy, and you can see that there's all kinds of fabulous praise on the cover. Lee Child, Karen Slaughter, any number of wonderful quotes in support of the book. The story of how you conceived of Nola and Zig is a wonderful one. So you've said it before, but I'd love it if you talked about going to Dover Air Force Base and how it struck you.
Yeah, I've done a ton of work with the USO, and they used to bring 6 thriller writers every year across to the Middle East during Afghanistan and Iraq times. So I've been to Qatar, I've been to Oman, I've been to Turkey. They took me all over the world. And it was there that I first heard of Dover Air Force Base. It's a place, I mean, even if you don't know the name, you know Dover. It's where those American flag covered coffins come off the plane when a soldier dies in action, and you see everyone salute that flag covered coffin. And Dover, I found that is a place where not only our fallen soldiers go, but when the space shuttle exploded, the astronauts' bodies went to Dover. When 9/11 happened, the bodies of the Pentagon victims went to Dover, and all of our spies across the globe, whether it's our 007s or people in the CIA, all the ones on secret missions, if they die on their mission, their bodies go to Dover too, which means that Dover is a place filled with secrets. But what I was struck by more than anything was how how much love and tenderness the morticians there show those who have whose bodies they have to deal with. They'll spend 12 hours rewiring someone's jaw because they want to smooth it over with clay because a mother wants to see her son one last time. Or they'll rebuild someone's hand from scratch because a mother says she wants to hold her daughter's hand one last time. These are amazing people. And I thought, that's a hero. So that's where Zig came from, the main hero from the book. He's a mortician who sees things on bodies that other people miss. When you take care of bodies, the one thing that's amazing is morticians, everyone thinks they're about the dead. They're not. They're about the living. They're trying to give that one thing that none of us get when we lose someone we love, which is closure. And I love that idea that here's this one guy working for closure and seeing these things that medical examiners or anyone else might miss hidden on the body. And then I thought, okay, I have the book, but I said, don't start the book until you have Nola, who's the other main character. And I was in a military area that was filled with art. And I said, why does the Army have all this art? I don't understand. And this is true. They explained to me since World War I, the military has had an actual painter on staff who paints disasters as they happen before, whether it's storming the beaches of Normandy, whether it's 9/11, whether it's Vietnam, they're painting the picture. And I said, you're telling me everyone's racing in with guns blazing, and you got a guy who's running in with a paintbrush in their pockets? That's the craziest guy in the world. I want to meet him. I got to meet him. And they said, you mean her? You want to meet her? And that's where Nola was born, is this incredibly self-destructive young woman who was thrown away like trash as a little kid, never had a father, never had a family. She's never going to have one. Zig, the mortician, lost his daughter when he was younger. He's never going to have his daughter back. So neither of them will ever have what they want, but by, in a strange way, knowing each other, they get a little piece of that elusive thing we all need, which is, as we mentioned, closure. And that was where the setup of these characters came from. And as Barbara said, you never need to read the book before. You can see it all. Just read The Escape Artist Code. It's all set up for you.
Well, you can. I mean, I love
the lightning rod. The lightning rod.
The lightning rod, right. I love the idea of a found family, for people who either never had one or whose family has in some fashion destructed. But before we go on, Brad, I wanted to tell you something. There is a television, MHC TV is a foreign produced video streaming channel, which I think now is available through Netflix. I can't remember for sure, but they have all this wonderful foreign crime and foreign stories and whatever. And one of them is a series called The Undertaker, which is German. And it takes place in a small city in Germany. And the Undertaker is hooked up with a policewoman, not surprisingly, so they can actually solve crimes. But he has that same desire to make the dead look well for the people coming to mourn them. And they go through some of that. There's a kind of cadaverous young man who takes tremendous care. He's putting makeup on them. He's brushing their hair. He's polishing their fingernails. He's, patching holes if, there was something destructive. So if any of you are curious about Zig and what he's doing, you could actually watch a version of it on this TV program. And so I felt right at home with Zig, because there are like 8 seasons of The Undertaker. So, so I've watched them. And I do think it takes a special person, to be able
the morticians there are, they will literally wash, someone's hair. They will find, and you'll see all the tricks they use. I don't make them up in the book. I couldn't possibly make something like that up. They gave me all of them. And the ones you see in the book, whether it's how to make skin look, so it doesn't look leathery and look old, but look to life. People need that, especially when you send your sons and daughters off to war and then they, you're 20 something years old and you're coming back in a box, and that last view of them. And even down to, you'll see in this one, there's photographers who check what these bodies, when they come in and photograph every item in their pockets. So whether it's loose change, whether it's a half-written letter home, the last letter that they're ever going to have from their child who's now gone, or even something as silly as 2 wedding bands, because they realize, oh my gosh, he was married to 2 different people while he was away. So again, this is a place that has access to these unbelievable secrets. And the ones that I use in the book are always kind of come from the research of going down to Dover, talking to the morticians there, talking to the people in personal effects, and the amazing things you'll find in someone's pockets when they don't know they're going to die and suddenly they do. It's amazing what people carry around with them.
This often comes up when talking to people who write police procedurals about, whether they are greeted with antipathy, or whether officers, if they go to them for help, are willing to share how things work. What reaction have you obviously have had a positive one, but did people at Dover and in the morticians welcome this, or were they a little reluctant to have you writing this?
I think every place is always reluctant when someone's coming in until they see what the work is. And I think once they saw the escape artist actually come out, the reaction was beautiful. I mean, it's funny. Someone said to me, "Oh my gosh, I took your book to the morticians convention." I didn't even think of the fact that, of course, there's a morticians convention. And everyone's always writing about the medical examiner, and the medical examiner is always the star, but our star is a mortician of all things. And the same thing with our artist in residence. Amy Brown, who used to be the real artist in residence for the U.S. military, was just so happy. She actually helped me with the lightning rod, and getting that feedback is vital. But obviously, I'll never know what it's going to be. And so when you see that positive reaction, I know it sounds so silly, but I want to do right by these people who help me and who bring that closure to other people. So it's nice when I get to kind of show them that the dignity and the respect that they show these fallen soldiers matters. And I think they really appreciate that someone's recognizing what they're doing, although I firmly believe none of them does it for recognition.
Well, if you're writing about, real people doing a real job, even if your characters are fictional based on real people, there's a lot of trust that has to go into that. They have to believe that you're going to portray them fairly. And obviously you've done a wonderful job. Now, you have not written more than a couple of sequels. I mean, you've written a number of standalones. Is this your 10th book, right?
No,
I mean, sorry, in the thriller thing. Sorry, I know you're
third. This is number 13. So there was a trilogy. So maybe you're counting the trilogy as one. Okay. So I did do a recurring character in the trilogy of The Inner Circle, the first, the Fifth Assassin, Beecher White, and the President's Shadow, our archivist character. We did 3 books with him. But yeah, I'd always done standalones. I did a trilogy where I started to launch a character. But the truth is, as you know, just because you have a character doesn't mean they should come back. And the only way they should come back is if there's something to still be said about them. And I think if I'm being blunt honest, what I didn't do in the first time I wrote a recurring character was I didn't really have a full depth of how deep that character needed to be. And when you solve the problem of the character, if they can't go on, you shouldn't bring them back just because people know them. And I think the reason people responded so well to Zig and Nola is they have so many stories they can tell. And I think you're right about that trust. I mean, that trust is so vital to bringing Zig and Nola to life. When I was doing research for this book, one of the things, I've done the secret tunnels below the White House. I've done the secret catacombs below the Capitol. With this one, I found that the U.S. government has a dozen secret warehouses all across the country that are filled with measures to deal with bioterrorism. So whether it's smallpox or anthrax or Zika or anything else, there are, whether you're in Arizona, whether you're in Florida, whether there's an attack in California or in New York or Texas or anywhere in between, there are these secret warehouses where within 4 hours, they can get a push package full of antidotes to you. They even got cobra venom, God knows whatever that does. And I said, you're telling me that the US government has all these secret warehouses. None of us can go inside. We don't know what's in them, but they're hidden right in front of our face, right by our big cities. I want to know what's inside them. And what you see at the end of the lightning rod, when you get to those final chapters and you get to go into the warehouse, I didn't make that up. That's all based on reality, and what you see in there is real. But it takes trust from all these places to say, we're going to trust you. We're going to show you, what we have inside these places. And that obviously makes that trust makes all the difference when you're writing those final scenes, or when you're trying to write about something that in a new world.
Absolutely true. The other thing about the conclusion, which we're not going to talk about, so don't panic here about spoilers, is that Brad has left various threads to still be explored with these characters. So I'm certainly hoping that you're not planning. I think they're so interesting, and there's so many layers to both of them that there's more that, only you can decide it, but there's certainly more that you can say. And it seemed to me that you left the door open for another book about them the way you ended this one.
Already started working on it. They are definitely coming back. And I think for me, each book is a combination of, I want to deal with those characters and then whatever issue I'm going on with in my own life. The lightning rod started with one of my great silly fears, which is the moment you'll see in chapter 1 where the character hands his car keys over to a valet. And the valet takes those car keys, but instead of parking the car, he hits the GPS button on the car and says, "Go home." And now the car plots a course to the man's house. The valet, of course, has his car keys with his house keys on it. And what he's doing, it's a robbery. But as he walks into the man's house to break in, there's a man waiting with a gun. This is not a robbery at all. This is a trap. And when bodies turn up and one of those bodies goes to our mortician, he finds something hidden on the body that leads to one of the government's most closely guarded secrets. I just ruined chapter 1 of the lightning rod for you, but that all comes out of my kind of obsession in that moment to set us up on that ride. And then, of course, using Zig and Nola as that kind of tuning fork to deal with those issues that I'm worried about.
Do you know, when I grew up on the North Shore of Chicago, and I can remember there was a tremendous scandal because there was, I think it was a hair salon, but it might have been a high-end clothing store. But anyway, there was an entire burglary ring operating out of this because they had valet parking. And exactly what you're saying is what happened. And it took them quite a while to laser in eventually on, this series of burglaries tying into this particular business. And then they figured out that the valets were in fact doing it. And yeah, we hand our keys over. I do it all the time here in Phoenix. We hand our keys over blithely in our cars, there we go. And we expect them to come back.
That's the way it goes. I might as well get a thriller out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. So one of the casualties in the scenario that you have set up is Colonel Archie Mint. And what significance does he have for Nola and Zig?
Yeah, what the book starts with is, and it says right there on the little description, is what's the one secret no one knows about you? We all have one, right? We're never going to tell it. And sometimes we even keep it a secret from ourselves. But Archie Mint contains Nola's greatest secret. And I always think that when you bring back a character, you can bring them back and just use them, like I said, as the tuning fork. But I feel like it's much better when they're not just the tuning fork, but when there's something to say about that character themselves. And so you see in this book, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, but you see Nola's greatest secret is revealed. And Archie Mint is tied to it. And suddenly this case that Nola cares about is something she deeply, personally cares about. And Zig is like, why is she getting so crazy over this guy who died in a break-in from a valet? But of course, all is not what it seems. Archie has everything going for me. He has a perfect life, the perfect wife, the perfect house, lives on the cul-de-sac where there's no traffic at all. But as we all know, regardless of what Instagram tells us, no one's life is that perfect. And I love the idea that, someone who you think is completely Captain America is not Captain America at all. And you will see Archie Mint revealed to be someone very much who will hopefully surprise you all.
So the lightning rod is Nola.
She is the lightning rod. That is exactly right. I mean, the trouble finds her. And I think for Zig and Nola, Zig has this core belief that more kindness in the world and a little more generosity will make the world a better place. It's a beautiful idea. It's a completely naive idea, but it's an idea worth fighting for. And Nola, again, thrown out like garbage as a kid, believes if you want the world to make sense, you grab it by the throat and you force it to make sense. You have to take control and you have to fight for what you want. And that's also a correct idea. And I think what you see in Zig and Nola, Nola strikes like lightning because that's how she knows to hit. She doesn't play well with others. And we've gotten these, beautiful, wonderful comparisons to the girl with the dragon tattoo. But I think what it really is nothing at all with the girl with the dragon tattoo. It's really my own belief system fighting for supremacy. I firmly, strongly believe with Zig. I also firmly, strongly believe with Nola. And of course, we all know, that neither one of them is completely right. It takes both those views to make the world kind of tumble forward. And that's how progress is always made. We always do it tumbling. It's never smooth and easy. But I think for me, that's of course where the title comes from, but it's what at the core base, Zig will never have his daughter back. Nola will never have a father. They will never, ever get what they want, ever. That is the true north of the book, is Nola needs a father and Zig needs his daughter. And that, as long as I follow that true north, those cases that they work on just, gnaw at them and gnaw at them and gnaw at them.
So Zig, a couple of years prior to this book, or sometime anyway, I can remember exactly how long it is, has grown tired at Dover Air Force Base, and he has retreated to a private practice. And so for this book to work, Archie Mint is the catalyst, then the death of Archie Mint, right? That brings him back to Dover.
Yeah. So what happens is when what I found out about Dover is that Dover will sometimes bring in outside morticians when there's too many people, when there's too much work, when there's a big battle happens in the war. And bodies don't just come in one by one. Sometimes they come in like a platoon comes in or a whole unit comes in, and they have to call in outside help. And no one is better at putting people back together than Zig. No one does it better. So when Zig gets the call from Dover saying, we need you back, we have a case that we need you to work on, he thinks, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get, working in private practice as a private mortician doesn't bring the closure and the happiness that he wants it to bring. So he's like, I'm going to go back. I'll go back. I'll do this one case, and that'll, I'll do my work and work with this young soldier who's just been killed. But of course, what he does is he finds something on that body that everyone else missed. And Zig, has that kind of, once his nose starts twitching, he knows there's a mystery afoot. He's not going to let it go. And that immediately leads him back to Nola. And when he sees her on the case, he's like, what's really going on here? There is something going on that no one has told me. There is an absolute mystery here in this murder, and I'm going to find it. And again, I won't reveal it, but you'll see that what he's digging at is something very, very personal that Nola does not want the world to know about. And I think for, I think, again, the best secrets we hide are sometimes the one we're not even aware about in ourselves.
Well, you set up a scenario where one person really can't resolve this, this situation. It's interesting, in thrillers, and I mean, even Reacher. I don't know if you saw the debut TV, but it's been so many years since The Killing Floor that I'd kind of forgotten how important the young woman in this small town is. In fact, I think she kind of steals the show. I mean, the guy that's cast as Reacher is interesting, but and much better suited to it than Tom Cruise. But it's really this young woman, and it takes the two of them together to work their way through the plot, the crime in A Killing Floor. And it takes Nola and Zig together to piece together what's happening here once the valet gets to the house for the robbery and Archie Mint winds up being killed. Can you imagine how it would work if only one of them, we're trying to.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't. The answer is, of course it doesn't, right? Nola can only get so far with her philosophy and her view of the world. Zig can only get so far with his philosophy. And I think Reacher's a good example. I mean, Lee Child gave us this beautiful blurb on the book and said, like Nola's one of the greatest, new creations of you have it there. You can read it. What does it say?
It says, Nola Brown is one of recent fiction's all-time great characters. Trust me, this is a terrific, compelling, unput-downable thriller.
Yeah, no, and one of the things he said, which you'll see on the inside in the longer blurb, is he said, I can't take my eyes off her, even on the pages she's not there. And I love the fact that Nola, is this kind of enigma, but just because she's cool, like Reacher, the same thing, doesn't mean you can solve it all yourself. And I think that's I like having my heroes be that human. I like that she's, she can do the fight, and she can do the brawn, and she can do the hitting, but you need more than that. You need subtlety. You need investigation. You need someone who can solve the riddles that come up and the things that that makes no logical scientific sense. So it does take both of them, and it does take both their worldviews. And for me as a writer, it lets me kind of, I always think that these books have been, for all these years, my free therapy, but it lets me really try and figure out which side of the world I look at. I mean, I'm someone who's written Superman and Batman, and now that I'm talking about it out loud, I mean, it's the same way. Like everyone says, who do you like better, Superman or Batman? And everyone will, people will say one or the other, but I love the idea that people are good and what Superman stands for. And I love the idea that Batman will pound you into getting it out of you, and that's how you make it. And in a strange, odd way, now that I'm saying it out loud, it's that same, those worldviews colliding. And of course, we all know his books are their best when the characters are working, in that kind of collision course.
Well, I also think that complementary skill sets are really important. I mean, we can go all the way back to Holmes and Watson. But,
Course.
there's a long, long history in crime fiction of people working together. It could be Elvis Cole and Joe Pike. It can be, and, you're right, it's worldviews, but it also, any one person can't really do it all. Even Reacher can't do it all, So I think
That's
that.
no, I agree.
And also, from a narrative standpoint, if you have two characters, there are things that you can bring out in their conversations and so forth together that you would have a more difficult time.
And not only that, for me, again, this is just my own style as a writer. Is I just need the dialogue. I don't care. Like the internal dialogue to me of that one lone person is fine if that's what you love to write. And there are people who are wonderful and beautiful at it. I like the back and forth and the back and forth, the Tracy Hepburn back and forth. I need that one-upsmanship. I need the comedy of that. I need the dry sarcasm in there. That is to me what's the catnip for me as a writer. So I always want to have two people who are opposing worldview going back and forth and saying you're insane, and them fighting over who's has the better view of it.
Well, and I mean, this is a book, obviously, since we're talking about it, but Brad has some history with film and television. And it's perfectly clear that dialogue is more successful in those media for storytelling than some sort of long internal monologue. It'll be interesting to see what Robert Redford, I think it's Redford, and I can't remember, is it George Martin doing it with him? Anyway, they're bringing back the Tony Hillerman series, which, because Tony, in his wonderful Navajo mysteries, there was a tremendous amount of internal dialogue and not so much conversation, and it made difficult television first time around. So I'll be interested to see how they overcome that in the new ones that they're bringing out. I mean, you only have to watch an Elmore Leonard movie or something to see, that.
That was always the best. The Elmore Leonard, that was where, that's the pattern that I loved. I love the Elmore Leonard of it all. And that's, of course, when I talk about this and this and this, was the master of it.
Well, I can tell that you really had fun with this. Why did it take 4 years? I mean, there's a lot of research in this book, so I'm not.
You sound like my editor now. Yeah, part of it's
Sorry.
research. I think part of it's. Listen, I've never written a book faster than 2 years. That's just how I am. The publisher always wants them every year. I'm like, if I did them every year, and God bless, so many people can do them in a year and do beautiful work. If I pumped a book out every year, they'd be garbage. They'd be churned out garbage, and I never want to be that writer. So that's one. That takes one. That gives me an extra year. The other part was just COVID. I think COVID for me it slowed me down. I lost a couple months in that. But the reality is I put out 2 other nonfiction books. We launched an entire nonfiction adult series. We did the Lincoln Conspiracy and the First Conspiracy about the secret plot to kill George Washington. So it looks like, yes, it's the first thriller in 4 years. But in the past 4 years, we've had 3 hardcover books out, plus a dozen kids' books. So, I'm doing it as fast as I can, but the one thing that never stopped is through those years, I was always working on Zig and Nola. They were always the primary piece.
I wasn't reproaching you. I was actually hoping to get you to say what else what you did, what you've been doing, because Brad's incredibly productive. The last thing I would ever say to Brad is he's just lazing around, writing on his laurels and not bothering to work. Not at all. I had an email, in fact, from the publisher of your I Am series that was all excited that we were doing this event and wanted us to stock up. And she was so crushed when I said to her, it's a virtual event, so I really won't do any good.
No, that's the thing is, we go, this is my 25th anniversary, and when I was 27 and the first book came out, I wrote about 27-year-olds because that's what I was. Right. And then for the second book, I got married. So I wrote about a married couple dealing with a loss in their lives. And then I had kids and I started writing kids' books. And it's not like I was conscious of those things. I wasn't like, now I know what I'll do. That was my own story. And all I've been doing for all these years is telling my own story and just knowing one thing loud and clear, which is I'm not that special. That hopefully, if I like this, that there are other people who will. And I love the fact that when we do these in-person events, and now that we're back in in-person events, or even just here, is we'll have someone, we'll have a woman who will come and say, I read your thrillers. My husband watches you on the History Channel. And here's my kid who loves your kids' books. And we grew up together. We got married together. We had kids together. And it's just an amazing thing to watch this true community that's developed around our books whatever the genre is. And I love them for that. I love the fact that whether it's fiction or whether it's nonfiction, whether it's kids or whether it's adults or even comic books, they come along, and those people are just, they bring me so much joy. And I'm so thankful. If I could say one thing, 25 years in, is I'm thankful for them.
Obviously, you've done wonderful work for a huge audience and a varied audience. But I read it the other day, and I was thumbing back through your biography, that you actually wrote The 10th Justice because the job you had thought that was going to materialize when you graduated from law school, took the bar exam, didn't materialize. And there you were, unemployed, and needing something to do. So in a way, you're sort of an accidental novelist. But in another way, do you think you always were a novelist and that law school was just a step on that?
Barbara, if you asked me that at our first 10th Justice interview, I would have said like, oh, I've always had this dream and it's always been my thing. And I went to law school. But the reality is I just don't believe, those were like the baseball quotes of just not wanting to mess things up in my first interview. The reality was I went to law school not for any other reason than I was scared. I was terrified. I didn't want my dad's life. I just didn't want to have, my dad always struggled with money. It was always very hard for us to come by. And I didn't want to have that struggle at the end of the month that I had to know, don't pick up the phone because that's when the phone collectors call. Or I knew that at the end of the month, that knock on the door, don't answer the door, pretend you're not home when they come to collect the rent check. I grew up with that and I hated it. And so I went to law school thinking, if everything bottoms out, I did want to write, but if everything bottoms out with writing, I'm going to have something to fall back on. But I was too scared to make it my full-time thing because I just didn't want to have that thing that my dad had given us. But yeah, I owe it to happenstance that the job I went to didn't work out. And I remember I was sitting at a sports bar of all things, and I banged the table with my then girlfriend, now wife. And I said, I know what I'm going to do with this year before I go to law school. And she said, what? And I said, I'm going to write a novel. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just, thought everyone has one novel in them and I take my shot. And that novel, as I've mentioned before, has got me 24 rejection letters. It never sold. It still sits on my shelf, my first book. But I was young and I was stubborn. And I said, if they don't like that, I'm writing another. And if they don't like that, I'm writing another. And I fell in love with writing when I wrote that book. And I finally found what I love to do. And 25 years later, I could have never, ever anticipated all the different things I've been lucky enough to work on, whether it's this or Superman and Batman or, any of these things that I've been able to do. It still feels like you said, like just kind of almost happenstance. Obviously a lot of hard work and a lot of kindness from a lot of people. And let's be honest, people like you didn't have to take me. You took me in for my first book. Okay. And I know everyone's like, oh yeah, but you were a bestseller. Like, no. When someone takes you for your first book, that is the ultimate show of faith, right? That's what they know. No one's going to come. It's not like I was from Arizona, but we had the kindness of booksellers, independent booksellers, who said, I don't know who this guy is, but I'm going to try it out. And that is what I fear today is so hard. Is that version of me, that 27-year-old kid right now who wrote something amazing. I guess, they can break it out themselves if they have a great TikTok that they put up there and someone will hear about it. But, it used to be for my first book, when John Grisham had his book and my book came out, we were in the Poison Pen on the same day on that same table. Even in Barnes & Noble or Borders or whatever, pick any store, we were there together. And people would come into the store and look at both books and say, oh, there's Grisham, but who's this guy? Oh, let me give it a shot. And they're browsing all the books. You, of course, have this incredible bookstore where people still are lucky enough to do that every day. But that's not the case around the country for so many people. And so it's so much harder to kind of get that moment in and that break that I got all those years ago. So thank you.
Not at the Poison Pen. Well, you're entirely welcome. Actually, you tapped into, I'm an accidental bookseller because I read the law. And just before I was to take the bar exam and become a real lawyer, a big medical incident intervened. And instead, I became a wildly successful plaintiff in an extremely difficult med-mal case, which is very hard to win if you know anything about law. And as a result, I didn't finish up and eventually opened a bookstore, a not-for-profit bookstore. And my penchant for risk-taking came to the fore. And we have, in fact, over 32 years this year, made it a point to give virtually every brand new author an opportunity to come to the store because we're not profit motivated. I want my staff to get paid. I want to pay the rent and the whole bit. But beyond that, I love taking risks and I love talking to people, which if you've ever done any trial work, you recognize is fairly easy to do. And usually in a trial, the best story wins regardless of the facts. I mean, that's just how it works out. Great deal of the time, even in a day of forensic medicine. So Brad was, we were, let me think, 8 years old in 1997, but we'd already, done our best to welcome in Don Winslow. I think Lee Child had 2 people. He was there for the killing floor. Don Winslow had 1. There's a whole history of people like you who came to the store.
Of course.
And,
And it's just vital. I mean, you can't, I mean, that is how I think it's always going to be, is you got to have someone who takes a chance. To this day, if you come out with a new book and you email me, I will put your book on Twitter. You can see on my Twitter account on a weekly basis, here's so-and-so's new book. I put a hashtag. It's like, support new authors. And we put it out there, and I don't care who you are. I don't care. I've never met you. I will push your book. And why? Because so many people pushed my book when they had no business pushing by an unknown kid who was just right out of law school.
Well, I think it takes authors and booksellers and, publishers giving a nudge, everybody working together to give new authors a chance, which reminds me, Patrick just used the chat function to remind me that Brad very kindly has written a personal letter to people, Poison Pen customers, and our copies, which we hope will be in any day, that Brad has signed for us. Each of them will come with a letter that Brad has thoughtfully written to you, and which we really appreciate. I must say I teared up slightly when I read it. Brad, thank you for doing that.
No, listen, and one thing, maybe this is like when I look back on this, I always think 25 years seems like a long time for a story. And I can't imagine, the ending. People always would say to me, what do you expect to be in 10 years? And that was never a fun idea to me. It always was like, I don't know, writing more books. What else you want to do? I never was like good at that. And it finally dawned on me that I never liked knowing the ending of the story. Why would you ever want to know the ending of the story? That ruins the story. It's like those people who turn to the back of the book and read the last page. And I know that there are people out there who love and swear by it, but you're insane if you do that. Like, I love you, but I can't, you ruin the whole book. That's the end of the story. So I'm thankful that I have no idea where we're going to go, what we're going to do, what the next version is going to be. But I'm thankful for every single person who's given me a shot to tell it.
It shows. I think you've been incredibly generous. I want to talk about something that actually happens at the end of the book, but this is not a plot spoiler. This is just a really cool thing. Nola and Zig are talking, and Zig recalls the 1980s. He said, he's talking about Liberace. To celebrate 50 years of entertaining, Liberace did 50 shows across the country, culminating with 2 solid weeks at Radio City, which is no small feat. And then he goes on to say that basically what it comes down to is there was a plant in the audience for every show. And before the age of social media, nobody figured that out. So it gave him, well, you tell it, it's your story.
So basically what happens is, this is a true story. I didn't make it up. Liberace did tour, he did all these shows to celebrate 50 years. And he would say, I'm here for 50 years. And he would say, look in the audience and say, and this couple right here, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, whoever they were, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary tonight. And everyone would clap and applaud, and they would say, oh, it's so wonderful. Love does exist in the world. And then the next night, he would say, and here is tonight, Mr. and Mrs. Amen. They're here tonight, and they're celebrating 50 years. And it was the same couple. It was the same couple every night. They were always there. And it was a big fat lie. No one called it. No one knew it, because you were only going to one show. But the question that Zig and Nola, as you're pointing out toward the end of the book, are fighting about is, Nola's like, well, he's a big fat liar. And Zig's like, or he's someone who's giving everyone that day a little bit of hope in the universe, that love still exists. So which is it? It's just your view of the story. So Liberace, I owe you big for that one. I got that one from the Liberace Museum, of all places.
I love the fact that we retreated back to an age without social media, when surprise was a part of the book selling world, and privacy. It's hard sometimes when we're doing these kinds of events to recognize. It feels like just Brad and I are talking, as though we were hanging out together no bar, no drink, but sort of that idea. And it's hard sometimes to remember that, eventually thousands of people will listen to this conversation. So it's intimate on one level, but completely not on another. But before social media and before Zoom, that wasn't true. And it did feel, if you were just the audience in Radio City that night, it would have felt to you like, that was it, right? It was a closed evening.
Oh, it was a beautiful night. In fact, my last event, or maybe it was 2 events ago, with you in Arizona, we took out, it was my last event of the entire book tour. And it was a 2-week book tour. Every night for 2 weeks, we went somewhere, and I finished in your store. And I said, you know what? The audience just seemed nice. They just did. And I said, whoever's here now at the end, let's go out for ice cream. And I took whoever was left, and we all went out for ice cream. And I didn't know any of the people. They were all strangers to me. I knew like 1 or 2 of the people who like was a friend of a friend came. But they were the nicest, sweetest, wonderful people. And you can't do that on Zoom. I can invite you all to come for ice cream, but I got to fly to New York, where I am right now. That is the one thing that you, as we all know, we lose that personal touch. It gets lost. And that means some of you lost free ice cream tonight.
Well, that's certainly true. On the other hand, you will have people able to watch this conversation.
That is true. I get people in states that have like, I've never seen you come. And I've always, I get people who come and ask me every time, can you come to whatever state they're from, that just doesn't get the tour or doesn't have a bookstore like Poison Pen to bring whatever, authors they want. And they get to come. So I do take thanks for that. So we got to figure out how to get them ice cream as well.
Well, you need to take it up a level, kiddo, because not long ago, Patrick and I were doing an event with somebody, and Patrick said, oh, look, he said, our first question from Mongolia. You have no idea how big the international audience, we have 3 people now trained to ship internationally every day.
That's amazing.
I mean, Zoom has allowed us to we did a wonderful event for the First Lady of Iceland, whose book was highlighted in the New York Times Book Review today. And I'd had a wonderful conversation with her on February 19th. Was not really going to happen in an age before Zoom.
Of course, she's never coming. She's not going to come. Well, but yeah, of course, that's the beauty.
Probably not either. She probably would have stayed in New York or something. Anyway, Zoom gives us a chance to reach people that would otherwise perhaps never see Brad or get to hear Brad talk. But what we're going forward doing is combining Zoom, because we broadcast all our live events from the store. We actually have a little TV studio in the store now, so we can combine both. So you can still go out for ice cream and still get a question from Mongolia, which I think is great. Let me ask you one more thing. Again, it comes to the end of the book, but it's a theme that goes throughout the book, and it has to do with Zig's relationship with his bees, and particularly the queen bees, one of whom is called Diana 27, and one of whom is Diana 28. And so that's another thread that Brad has that pulls us through the story, and it's not going to be a spoiler for you if we talk about it. I love this.
Yeah, I won't tell him what happens in the end, because we don't want to spoil that. But Zig is a beekeeper, and in the Escape Artist and in the Lightning Rod, those bees allow me to play my metaphor games. But the one thing that he finds is he finds a hive. In his hive, 2 queens. There is not supposed to be 2 queens. There's supposed to be 1 queen. And when you have 2 queens show up in your hive, for anyone who has a beehive, usually it means one thing: you got to squish the queen. And he likes his queen. You don't want to squish the queen. I won't tell you how it comes out, and it's just obviously a minor problem he's dealing with in his beehive. But that minor problem, of course, leads to thematically something that, of course, the book is trying to deal with, and that Zig is trying to deal with. And I will say, I got really lucky on that one. I was talking to a friend of a friend who's a beekeeper, and I just was, like, tell me what's interesting that you've ever come across. And when he said it, I was like, oh my gosh, that works perfectly with what I'm dealing with right now. So, it sometimes you can try and look for the great thing, and you find the great thing because you've hunted so hard. And sometimes you're lucky enough that someone just hands you that lucky thing. Liberace, I searched for forever for that story. I was like, I need a perfect story for this one, looking for it. But that beekeeper one truly just fell in my lap.
Let me emphasize that when Brad says squish the queen, he's talking about the old queen. Not
the old queen. You got to kill the old queen, and you let the new queen thrive. That's exactly right.
Right. So the cycle of life, whatever it all is. There really are so many treasures in this book. I mean, I
appreciate one of my favorite. I should leave you with this. One of my favorites is there's a scene where I always talk to the government about ways that we can secretly communicate with each other, because all of us, we all know that all of our stuff is being watched now, right? If you put stuff on WhatsApp or you put stuff on Signal, you hit send and it goes out into the ether, out into the internet. Everyone can crack encryption. It can be cracked. It's not impossible. So I said to my friend who works for one of the big acronym agencies, I said, how do you do it? And he said, well, here's what I would do. He said, you and Barbara are going to try and have a secret conversation. You're going to get a Hotmail account. You're going to write your message to Barbara. Don't hit send in your Hotmail account. Hit instead save draft. Okay. Now give Barbara the login to log into your Hotmail account. She's going to go into your draft. She'll read the draft you wrote, delete it, write her own response. She won't hit send either. And now the two of you are having a conversation that no one's ever seen. You've never hit send. You've never sent anything. I thought that's such a good idea. And it was until General Petraeus used that, the head of the CIA, to cheat on his wife. And I said to my friend, what do I do now? He used my trick that's in the book. It's in the lightning rod. And what he said to me, and I won't ruin this part, but you'll see what he lays out when they lay out that story, and what Zig uses and what Nola finds in the book is something based on real technology. And it's just, again, the newest. If you're going to have a new mousetrap, you got to keep building that new mousetrap, and you'll see a really amazing way to speak to someone secretly. But again, I didn't make it up.
Or you can go back, because I've had recent conversations with spy story guys like Joe Cannon and Paul Vittich and so forth. You can go back to old spy technology and
that's what they're doing all
leave a
over.
letter in a tree.
They are literally doing. That's actually exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Nobody can crack, the letter that you hit in the newspaper or whatever it might be. Anyway, we're going to call Patrick up to see if we have any questions from the audience, or if Patrick has questions. But I do want to emphasize that this is a 420-page delight that you find. There's so many things to find in it that will enrich your life and your reading experience. If you didn't read The Escape Artist, it will send you back to get a copy. And now we're all going to wait for the sequel. Patrick, come join us and tell us what's going on.
Well, yeah, you got a lot of devoted fans watching from all over the place. A lot of them making very nice comments about your work, your books. But I have a question about the I Am series. And how many have you done so far? And do you have kind of a loose criteria of how you choose the subjects?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you, because I brought rewards. If you come to the book signing, you get rewarded. And so for those who don't know, we do the Ordinary People Change the World book series. It's a series that I use to give my kids better heroes to look up to. I'm tired of the garbage that my kids are being fed on Instagram every day. And that's truly what they're being fed. So Chris Eliopoulos and I, our amazing artists on the series, started with I'm Amelia Earhart. We did I Am Abraham Lincoln, I Am Rosa Parks, Albert Einstein. And I'm going to show you, no one knows this. So the only thing I ask is, don't tell anyone, don't put this online. You'll get me in trouble with the publisher. You really will. So take the blood oath. I'm going to show you who's new. And some of these you've seen, but so Dolly Parton comes next, is the newest one. And then we have I Am Pay comes along with it. And then I'm going to show you this, again, the reward for coming to our events. We're doing I Am John Lewis is coming. That has not been announced yet. That is
wow,
the fun. We're
cool.
only announcing to people who come to the different book events. So don't tell anyone. And then that's the kids book series. That's what comes next there. And then I will tell you this, because I did post and said, anyone come to me, I'm going to tell you the new conspiracy book that we're doing. So we've done the first conspiracy about the secret plot to kill George Washington with Josh Mensch and I did that book. And then we did the Lincoln conspiracy about a secret plot to kill Abraham Lincoln, not the Lee Harvey Oswald, my gosh, not the John Wilkes Booth plot, but a plot at the beginning of his presidency. And the newest one that we're working on is, it's called the Nazi conspiracy. It's about a secret plot to kill, that the Nazis had to kill Winston Churchill, Stalin, and FDR all in one fell swoop, a triple assassination. So don't tell anyone, don't put it online, don't say anything. But if you come to the events as a thank you, you get to hear about it first. So those are the next one. Those are the next books that will be coming. The Nazi conspiracy comes out in 2023, and you'll see Dolly Parton and I Am Pay in June. We're doing actually Superman and Batman, of all things, are coming out in September. And then we do John Lewis after that.
Wow, it must have been at Yalta. I can't wait to see it, but that's
You'll see.
far as
Not at Yalta, though. Not at Yalta.
Not Yalta?
They meet 2 times. And that's not one of them. You'll see, but it's a good one.
Oh, that's right. They were in North Africa. I forgot. Okay, Patrick, well, let's ask the inevitable question, which is what is likely to be happening on, or is anything happening with TV or a movie for any of your work?
Yeah, so the Lincoln Conspiracy is being worked on right now for Netflix. Our director is a woman named Nia DaCosta, who's doing the next Marvel movie of all things. And she's just incredible and amazing. We have a couple of great screenwriters who've been working on it. And obviously they have to do the script and do the pitch and do the whole thing. So we're still a million miles away from that. And then we're working on Zig and Nola right now. Obviously, I kind of stepped back and didn't want anyone to, there was a point where they optioned it a couple of years ago. And I said, you know what, this is silly. Let them see the other books first. Let them see the whole breadth of the characters rather than just trying to sell it and promising something. So now that the book is done, we're again looking at that.
So you're
looking. And then obviously we have for our kids' books, we have a TV show that's on PBS right now. It's called Xavier Riddle in the Secret Museum, and it's our kids' books brought to life every week. And I love the fact that we get to do that in cartoon form. So you'll see Xavier, Yadina, and their best friend Brad, the most handsome cartoon character in all of existence. And I get to be a little cartoon on PBS every day. So that's a real fun one for us to do. So we have season 2 coming up of that.
How cool is that? Robert has a question. He says, any chance of Wes, Rollo, and Lisbeth checking in sometime in the future?
I love you for that question. I love you for that. So it's funny. Rogo's, I mean, these are characters from the Book of Fate. And I loved working on Wes. I still miss Wes. He's a great character. And all of them were really fun characters to work on. So you say that and it's like a way back machine for me, but no plans to bring him back just now. But the guy who is based on one of them, who's my friend, who's a traffic ticket lawyer, it was just his birthday. And literally today I wished him happy birthday on Facebook. And I always name the character after him.
That's cool. Let's see, we got a good one. Kathy just makes the comment. She says, Brad, your metaphor games make your books a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, my metaphor games, I play serious metaphor games and I appreciate it. Those are no accidents. There is no story that is told in that book that is just for fun. I'm crazy about it. And but I take them very seriously. And I think that to me, when I'm reading something, and again, it's not because I'm, why? Because that's what I like to read. I like to read murder mysteries. I like to read great thrillers, but I like when I learn something. And I like especially when it's something that thematically hits me in a way that I didn't even realize that the story was being told.
Linda has a question. She says, which area provided you with better character traits, Boston or Columbia? The all-night restaurants around Columbia were always full of characters. And then she says, I applaud your dedication towards literacy.
Oh, you're very kind. Yeah, we've so the answer to that is the best place actually for me was Washington, D.C. and it wasn't Columbia at all, because it was the subways. The subways in D.C. and the subways in New York always gave me physical characters. I mean, if you see a character that you're like, that sounds like me, it was because I used to ride the subway. I was never good with physical description. When I wrote The 10th Justice, my first book, the editor said, Brad, I read your whole book. I love this book. You don't describe how anybody looks. I did the whole book without describing a single book because I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. I was like, what you are is what you say. So I went back and did all the descriptions, and I literally was stealing people that I would see, and I'd be like, oh, that's what he looks like. I see him in my head, but I would never tell anyone. And every day when I would write after that, I would always just look down and see what I was wearing, and that's what the character would wear. And then his next edit came back and said, I like the descriptions, but every character is basically wearing a faded T-shirt and jeans. And I didn't even realize it was because that's what I was wearing every day. So I finally had to up my game. So those were where I got it. And then in terms of literacy, what I know she's talking about is we've had a big fight over banned books over the past year. 2 of our books in the kids' book series, I Am Rosa Parks and I Am Martin Luther King Jr. got banned by a school board in Pennsylvania. And not because of the content, they banned an entire list of books about diversity. Books by Malala, books about Sesame Street talking about race, Hidden Figures, the famous book about the 3 female scientists at NASA. They banned an adaptation of that. It was just absurd. And we fought back and said, everyone should buy all the books on this list. That's how you fight back. And we got 5,000 books, not just my books, but every book on that list, 5,000 books, thanks to the amazing these amazing women who we teamed up with, who ran the Little Free Library and were activists in the community in Pennsylvania. But the one thing I think you'll see is it's just going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening even more as we're all seeing every day this new banned book story. And I looked through history at why people ban books. And in fact, I found out that the first book that's banned, generally historians consider the first book that's banned as a country that we ban, is Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. And why? Because slave owners really didn't like the fact that it was talking about ending slavery. They didn't like the fact that it was talking about abolition, the abolitionist movement. They didn't like that their way of life was threatened. And that is what book bans are always about. They're about people who are worried about losing power. And I will say, if you are cheering as books are being pulled off the shelf, you're on the wrong side of history. So we've been definitely trying to lead the charge on fighting back. So if you see a book that's banned, if you see it on Twitter or Facebook, wherever you follow your news, do me a favor, buy the book and give it to a library, give it to a kid, give it to someone else. Let every time they ban it, make you put another one out in the universe.
Don't you love seeing Art Spiegelman, Mouse, coming back as a bestseller? It's just great.
Great.
It's such a groundbreaking book.
The irony of that one was my son was physically reading Mouse the day it was banned. It was assigned to him in his school. He was truly in the midst of it and was like, what? And it allowed me to have that moment to flip to the page that they found, objectionable. And he was like, this is a joke. And this is, a teenager laughing at like how absurd it is. So obviously I wish it weren't the case, but it is amazing to see what's happening in the culture right now in these kind of culture wars.
Right. John, who's watching from YouTube, hey, John, he says, any chance of a Decoded style show coming around again?
Yeah, I love doing Decoded. I did. And I still love Buddy and McKinley and Scott. We still are all, still in touch. We had a 10-year anniversary party last year where we all got online together during the middle of the pandemic. But I feel like Decoded for me right now is our conspiracy books, our nonfiction books. That's what Decoded is right now. It's me doing Decoded in book form. And what I love about it is it allows us to just do truth. No scary music, no, none of the stuff that kind of has to always happen when you do these shows. I love what we did with Decoded. I also worry a little bit, did Decoded add to people like loving conspiracies in a weird way or asking like these kooky conspiracies that are out there right now? And Decoded for me was always about one thing and one thing only, which was finding the truth. So we still, in my head, we still do Decoded. We just do it in book form. But if you like it, tell the History Channel. They need to hear it. For sure, tell them about it.
And forgive me if you already mentioned this, but will there be television adaptations of those books, of the non?
Right. So the Lincoln Conspiracy is what we're working on right now for that one, for Netflix.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, Susan has a question. We've been getting this one fairly often these days, which is, who are your favorite writers, living or dead? It's a toughie.
Yeah, no, my favorite is this guy, Brad Meltzer. He's my favorite author. Sometimes I read his books and watch himself on television and just tap myself and say, oh, Brad, you've done it again. No, I mean, my favorite writer of all time is still Alan Moore. I still read Watchmen every single year. It's the only book I never reread books. I just don't. But I reread Watchmen every single year. What's coming up on the anniversary, and they just sent me an early copy of the new edition. I love Ken Grimwood's Replay, and they're making a brand new edition of it. It went out of print for a while, and now it's coming back. And I always loved that book. So he's someone I admire. He wrote this book about replaying your life, and I love that. I love The Many Lives of Addie LaRue. I thought that was the best book I read this year. And I just bought her other books. It's like one's like Vicious and one's, I just bought them. I have them.
That's V.E. Schwab.
V.E. Schwab,
right?
Yeah. And I love her stuff. And who else do I love? Who did Grunt? Gosh, why am I blanking? Middle Age is just taking my brain. The nonfiction book, who I thank her actually in the lightning rod. Now I'm really embarrassing myself. Why am I blanking on her name? She did Grunt and she did Stiff and she did.
Mary Roach.
Mary Roach. Thank you. Oh my gosh, it was coming out of my mouth. I love Mary Roach's work. I will read anything she does. In fact, we're doing an event together next month just for fun. And I think she's one of the best. And then in the terms of the thriller genre, I think the book that I'm most looking forward to by someone who's around, I can't wait for Gillian Flynn's new book. I don't really reread many thriller writers. Once I see their magic trick, I'm like, okay, I got it. Let's go to the next one. But I read everything she does. I think she's just really special.
Do you have a favorite superhero?
I still like Batman. I stistill love Superman. Ask me any day and I'll give you a different answer. And I have a soft spot for Captain America and Spider-Man too. I can't help it. I love the underdog. I can't help it.
Let's see here. Anything going on with Nico Hadrian?
Nico lives in my brain forever. Nico's a bad guy who I never thought was a bad guy. The thing about Nico, when you read him and all, he's in 4 of my books. Nico's there. And the thing about Nico is Nico's never wrong. He's totally crazy. He's a murder machine, but he's never wrong. And I love that character. I do think about bringing him back. He's of everyone that you've mentioned, he's the one that's probably closest to it.
So he's on ice for the moment, but he could be brought into active duty soon.
That's right.
I guess as a final, not a question, but a really nice comment, good place to stop. Linda says, just hearing you is our ice cream.
Linda, I love you for it. You get extra sprinkles on that. Let me leave you with this. 25 years is a long time. And not just because I had a full head of hair when I did my first event with you all, but I love the fact, I know I'm kicking off tomorrow. We do the physical, we start going back in person, we get to see people, but I love this because we get to say thank you to those who showed up here. It means more than I can express. I know I'm supposed to come here and I'm supposed to promo the book and you buy the book and all the signatures and that's all great. I'd love you to do that. Support a great bookseller like Barbara and everyone who's incredible at Poison Pen. But what my MO for doing these events is simply to say thank you, thank you, thank you for what you've done for me for these 25 years. You have let me talk to imaginary people for 25 years, but you've let me live my dream for 25 years. And when I meet you face to face, please tell me you were here tonight. So I can say thank you and shake your hand in person. It means more than I can express. That's the only thing I care about, nothing else.
Well, we certainly thank you because we would not have survived without people like Brad. So it's been a two-way street. So lucky book 13. Here we are, the lightning rod. And it's wonderful. So I want to thank all of you for taking time to spend time with us this afternoon. There will be a podcast of this conversation available probably tomorrow. And the video will stay up on Facebook and YouTube, our Facebook and YouTube channels. So you can recommend it to people who are not able to come in this afternoon. And you certainly can order a signed copy. Brad is fortunate that he lives right near one of the great bookstores in the United States, Books and Books, which is a much bigger store run by a man who not only is a great bookseller, but really loves business. And I admire him a lot for that. But in any case, wherever you can find a copy, whether it's autographed or not, I really recommend the lightning rod. So thank you, Brad. Thank you, Patrick. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.